Hi guys, I wanted to take a few moments to chat with you guys about the Bluetti Split-Phase systems. Basically, what is it? What do you need to set it up? And then also talk about some of these accessories. I know there's a lot of confusion on this box particularly, which is called the Fusion, on what it does, and is there going to be an upgraded model for the AC500? So first, really, let's talk about each individual unit that we have in front of us that's required to create split phase. We have two AC300s. If you have two AC500s, this also pertains to you as well. But each AC300 only outputs 120 volts. And we know this for a couple of reasons. One, we have a label here that says it's only outputting 120 volts, but we can also see the receptacle style here. It's only 3 prongs, meaning it's one neutral, one hot wire that's outputting 120 volts, and then the bottom prong is your ground. It's the same thing for the larger cable up here, which is your TT30. It is also just 3 prongs, so your ground on the top and hot and neutral at the bottom. So once again, this AC300 and AC500 would only be outputting 120 volts. Well, what happens if you have an appliance at home or a requirement for 240 volt service? Well, that's where split phase comes in. Basically, you take one AC300 or 500 and you pair it with another one. And the pairing happens through a communications cable that actually plugs in between the two. But once you sync two of these up in split phase mode, you can output 240 volts of service. Well, that's where this Fusion box came in. And all it does is it takes the power. Okay, so there's one wire from the master, and it takes a wire from the slave, and they both come in at the bottom here. So here's your master wire, here's your slave wire, and it allows that power to come into one, basically, receptacle outlet box. So the wire on the left, which is the master, powers these first 3 receptacles. Okay, this is strictly ran off of the master. The slave wire strictly runs these 3 receptacles. However, when the power comes up from both the slave and the master, they are merged into this receptacle here. And if you guys hopefully can see this, this will say it's 240 volts. The reason why is it's now a 4-prong outlet. So basically I have my ground, directly across I have my neutral. On the top I have the hot for my master and the hot for my slave. So each of these, the hots, are providing 120 volts of service. They're just providing 120 volts of service on opposite phases, okay? And what I mean by that is this is an AC unit, so it's doing alternating current. It creates a wave, and the best way for me to show that to you is the pure sine wave. Let me go ahead and sit up real quick. Pure sine wave logo here, and you can see there's a wave here. Okay, this is just representing the alternating current. Well, if this unit's doing an alternating current and this unit's doing an alternating current, well, we can't have them on the exact same wavelength, or their peaks peaking at the same time and their dips dipping at the same time. We need them to be on opposite phases, okay? So we're going to go over to a television I have down here by my AC500 so I can hopefully show this to you. So let's go ahead and turn on this TV. Okay. Go ahead and make sure that the computer is still on. And you can see here I have 2 waves, okay? The solid wave here, let's say that represents my master, and then the dotted wave represents my slave. Well, you can see that the peak of the master is not happening at the same time as the peak of the slave. They're 2 opposite phases, okay? This is what creates 240 volts. Basically, this is your 120 volt here, 120 volt here. So plus 120 volts, negative 120 volts. The difference between the 2 phases is 240 volts. This line in the middle here is your neutral, which is, let's say, represents 0, plus 120, negative 120, okay? 240 volts difference. So basically, that's what these 2 units are doing. One's creating the solid line, one's creating the dotted line. The communication cable that is required to go between these 2 units is what allows the master to communicate to the slave and say, I'm creating this phase, you create the other phase. And they sync up with each other to ensure that that occurs. Well, the Fusion box does have some intelligence in it that will monitor that, okay? So there is some electronics in here. First, it's going to check that there's power coming from each of the units, the master and the slave. If it doesn't sense power from both, this fusion will not turn on. It will also check the phases between the two. If they're not close to or near to 240 volts difference, it also will not come on. I think it's exactly, let's say 235 to 200 and almost 50 volts is what it will allow. And then anything outside that range, this box will shut off. That's the only thing that this thing does. Outside of that, this is a glorified Y adapter. So the reason why I'm saying this is I abandoned this, the use of this Fusion box about 3 to 4 months after I had it, simply because I did not like how the internal grounding goes inside this box. It wound up causing me issues with connecting it to my home's transfer switch, so I got rid of this. What did I replace it with? Well, like I said, this is a glorified Y adapter. So down on the floor here, I have a Y adapter, and this is a cheap one I just bought from Amazon, okay? And you can see it's two plugs, on the top. These are two TT30s, which is exactly what's in the AC300. And then they both just come down, they merge into a single cable and a single output. Well, this is a 50 amp outlet style. I could not find a 30 amp to a 30 amp when I was looking. It may be available now, but basically it doesn't matter. For me, I knew I was going to be upgrading to a 50 amp later on, AC500. So this was perfectly fine with me. And you can get an adapter that just brings it right back down to a 30 amp style. It's not saying it's outputting 50 amps. It's just a style. So if I took one of these, and remember I have up here my master. I have a piece of blue tape on here because I always make sure that my blue tape always goes back into the master. Well, we're going to have the same thing here. If I took this plug and I plugged it into the master, and I took this other plug and I plugged it into the slave, well, I have an output here, then on the opposite side of the cable, of 4 prongs. I have a ground, a neutral on the top, a hot from the master, and a hot from the slave. It's exactly what you have here. You have a ground, a neutral directly across, a hot from the master, and a hot from the slave. Now, if you need to change the style of this plug and you want it to match, it's as simple as this. We're going to go back down to the floor real quick so I can show you. They call them dog bones. I don't know why they call them dog bones, to be straightforward, but they're basically just a small piece of cable that changes or adapts the styles. So basically I have a 50 amp plug here, which is the same thing I have there. So we're going to plug this in. Okay. So now my Y adapter goes from, let me flip this over, 2 TT30 plugs, comes down, merges into a single cable, comes out as a 50 amp style, still 30 amps here, and then it changes to that L14 that you saw over here. Okay, so we're going to go back here, we're going to compare the two. So you can see the two right there, they're exactly the same thing. So on here, this Y adapter, which probably cost me about, let's say 30 bucks, is going to do almost 80% of what this is going to do. Like I said, this has a few checksums. Make sure the power's coming from both. Make sure it's 240 volts difference. But you don't need this. And why don't you need those checksums? If you have a communication cable running between these two units, and these two units are in split phase, they're already doing that checksum. Okay, now am I saying you could accidentally still output 120 volts that are in the same phase? Absolutely. But there's a reason why Bluetti abandoned this. It's really not needed. If you note on their website, they also now sell these Y adapters. They're just official Bluetti Y adapters. And I'm going to show it on my AC500 system. You're not going to be able to see it as clearly as that, but over here I have this black cable right here. This is from the master. Down here I have it in my slave. It goes actually behind the units and it comes up. It merges the two cables here, and then that one single cable goes into my inlet, which is going to my transfer switch. This is just a Y adapter, and this is actually an official Bluetti product. So you can buy this today. I'm not sure if it's on the website. It might be only available through the Indiegogo website, but you can ask the question to Bluetti, and I'm sure they can provide the link. But they went from the Fusion, abandoned that, and they went to Y adapters. So they were doing exactly what I did, let's say about a year ago. So I want to also talk about another thing real quick, because I know a lot of individuals might look at this Y adapter and go, this might be a suicide cord, and it's not. Because, and what I mean by suicide cord is, let's say if I plug this into the master and it gets energized, is the other side also going to become energized? And if I accidentally touch this, am I going to get electrocuted? Okay. So what we're going to do real quick is we're going to take this over to my AC500. Let me get down the ground. And the AC500 is on, okay? This is actively running and powering my house. Once again, that's what the black wires are doing. Now, I installed these dog bones here. These are also dog bones. They're just extension cords, so there's nothing special about it. The Y adapter here, it's so short, going from the master to the slave. You don't think there's a huge span of distance between them. You'd be surprised that this little Y cannot stretch that far. So you may need some dog bone extensions. Basically, let's just say cord extensions. And that's all these yellow cables are. Okay, so we're going to take this blue one, which, like I always said, blue always goes into the master, and we're going to plug this into the master. Now, bear with me, because doing this with one hand is never easy, but I know getting the camera up closer to you for you guys to see is more important. Okay, so we're going to put this in real quick. Okay, so this is in. Remember, AC is on because I'm sending power to my house, which means automatically this 30 amp is also on, which means now that this is energized, okay? And if I look on the other side of the Y adapter, that one of these hots is also energized as well, okay? So we're going to validate that real quick. I have a line tester here. All it's going to do is check for power. So basically, it's quiet right now. If I go near power, let's go here. Okay, it's going to, oops, sorry, hopefully if you guys can see that, it's going to start detecting that there's power here, okay? So now I know not to touch this, but real quick on these things, be careful with them. They're not 100% accurate, so don't rely on these to say 100% of the power is off. There's just a great visual and audible representation for videos like this, okay? So for me to go here, you guys clearly can hear it, okay? So if I go to, let me scoot over to the other end of the Y adapter, we're going to go check for power, okay? Okay, so it's slightly beeping there simply because it probably has some power that it's detecting, but if I go to the top of the hot, or the top of the plug, it's detecting power from the master, okay? So we 100% know that there's power making it through this Y adapter and coming out, but it's only one side because I only have the master plugged in right now, okay? This other yellow cable here that goes to my slave is not plugged in, okay? So the concern I've seen on a lot of the community forums is this a suicide plug now? Is this side energized simply because I have this plugged in, and am I going to basically electrocute myself if I accidentally touch this? So first, for testing to validate it, we're gonna come over here and we're gonna check this this plug, and I'm gonna use my different hand, okay? And let me see if I can get this cable flipped over real quick. Okay. Now, we've got to stay away from this yellow cable because that yellow cable is energized. So let's see if we can do this. Bear with me, please. Okay. So we're going to take our tester again, and we're going to go check the ground, check one of the neutrals, check the other hot. Okay. We're not hearing anything. You guys can see that this thing is clearly still on. Okay. So I can assume that I'm not getting power. Now, when I say assume, because one, I'm not hearing anything from my line tester, but I assume that this cable is wired correctly. I assume that the hot wire coming from here is not bonded inside this cable here, that it's still producing a single hot on one side and a single hot on the other side, that these two hots never got merged. What I can't assume is that the Bluetti power station isn't miswired and that the hot and neutral are reversed. Well, if the hot and neutral are reversed, inside of this Y adapter here coming into the head of, or the output, the neutral is bonded together from each of the master and the slave, and the ground is bonded together from each of the master and the slave. So if Bluetti accidentally miswired that, and now my neutral is hot, and because it's bonded here, this then would become a suicide plug, because that would mean that one of these is active. That is why I never assume it, and I'm going to check to make sure that I don't sense any power here. Now, I obviously know that I've already checked this prior to this video through all my setups. I check everything, so I know it's not miswired, but you should always check this. And I'm going to probably say something that's going to scare the crap out of a lot of people. The neutral and the hots on your power station, on which is controlled by software. Just because it worked one time that it's the neutral is not hot, don't assume it. Always check this thing, okay? So we've checked it, okay? I know I can come over here and touch this thing all day long. And like I said, it's plugged in, okay? So the reason why this is happening is, once again, the hot that's coming from the master is going down. It looks like it merges into one cable, but it never merges the two hots, okay? So that's why this is not a suicide plug. Once again, I'm going to say it again. Don't assume it the next time you come and touch this cable, because there is something that could internally change on here. You can do firmware updates, software changes. Always just assume that this is hot, okay? It's just like a gun or a pistol. Always assume it's loaded, never pointed at somebody. Exact same thing with this. Always assume there's electricity flowing through here. So now what we're going to do is actually plug this in. So we have the voltage coming from the master and the voltage coming from the slave. So once again, it's going to be a one-handed operation. Hopefully. Okay. Okay. So we've got the power coming from the master, okay, down one leg. Power coming from the slave, both coming down to a single cable, going out to a 50 style output. We're using a dog bone to create the L14 style plug. So now I have the neutral at the bottom, the ground at the bottom, the neutral at the top, a hot from the master, and a hot from the slave. Well, now if I test the hots against each other using a voltmeter, I should get 240 volts. That's what this wire adapter is doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. So on my voltmeter here, I'm going to turn this on to AC, which, once again, if you guys see on that sine wave, it was a squiggly line. It's the exact same thing on the voltmeter. This is just representing the alternating current. Okay, so what we're going to do here, and once again, if you guys have seen my videos previously, it's not the easiest thing to do this stuff with one hand. We're going to try to attempt to put this in with one hand. Okay, actually we'll do this one. Okay, so I've got one prong in. Okay. Okay, so if I go over to my meter right now, you can see that I have 248, almost 9 volts. This is 240 volts. Basically what this meter is doing is, I'm going to take this out, it's comparing the voltage and phase difference between the hot from the master and the hot from the slave. So now I have a 240 volt receptacle. So once again, that's doing exactly what that Fusion box is doing over there, but we're just doing it with a much cheaper Y adapter, okay? Dog bones extensions, coming down to my Y adapter, merging it into a single line and a single output. So once again, Bluetti is now just selling this. I think they realized this was too much trouble. They didn't need it. So is there going to be an upgrade model for the AC500? The answer is no. And I asked this 4 or 5 months ago when I heard that the AC500 was coming out. Once again, I had already abandoned the Fusion box, and I was told that no, they were not doing it. Once again, I'm not surprised. I worked with Bluetti for months, back and forth about this Y adapter and why I refused to use this, and then why I switched to a Y adapter. And they follow suit. They did exactly the same thing with their black cable here and their Y adapter. So if you have a AC300 and you need to do split phase, you need a communication cable. Okay, you still have to get that from Bluetti, but you can simply just get a Y adapter. I'll put a link in the description for this specific Y adapter that goes from TT30 to a 50 out, and then I'll provide a link for the dog bone that switches it back to 30, and I'll provide a link for these dog bone extension cords, basically, because you're going to need them. If you need the 50 amp for the AC500, I'll try to get that link from Bluetti. I honestly don't have it. so that I can provide you the direct link for this. So hopefully this helps to clear up a few things about split phase. What is it? Well, it creates 240 volt service. You need 2 units, and you need a communication cable that goes between it. The 2 units also need to be set into split phase mode. The accessories from Bluetti, well, you don't need the Fusion. You can get it. It's nice to have if you want it. You don't need it, though. You don't need it for AC500. But you could just simply do a cheap Y adapter. So hopefully this answered all the questions for the AC500 environment and the AC300 environment for split phase. Thanks, guys, for watching.